And before I jump into kind of the first piece of this, is going to be about 15 or 20 minutes, 10 or less slides, kind of background about this group in particular. It would be helpful if you just go around and say your name and who you represent or who you with.
This supposed to come on?
There we go. So Alex Donat, I'm a physician at Donat Facial Plastic Surgery, which is just to the west of the outlined area there. I've been there for almost 14 years, and so proud to be here.
I'm Bill Mees. I'm Director of Development for Midland Atlantic Properties.
Greg Fusera with Capital Investment Group. We own the construction project is right across the street, and we're also developing.
I'll jump up here.
Yeah, I'm Pat Davis-Higgins. I'm the president here at Jewish.
I'm Jen's daughter. We own Kenwood Square with Site Centers.
Okay. Sir.
I'm Carl Wirtz. I'm the Associate General Manager for the Kenwood Town Center.
And I'm Dave Jacoby, and I'm the Senior General Manager at Kenwood Town Center.
I'm Mark Rippey from Nisbet Property Holdings, and we have the Seabank property over on Long 71 and the Kenwood properties here on Kenwood Road.
Greg Piancero, we have the property at 7565 Kenwood Road where Joseph Banks and Trio. We also have the Montgomery Road Center down where La Rosa's is, down on Montgomery. And we've developed the FBI site with partners, Dan Nair, the F&W building, as well as in Kenwood Park Place.
Dave, you designed that FBI site, didn't you? We are part of that. So. Well, thank you. I think that's helpful. Like Ray said, this is the second of 3 focus group meetings. I'll go over the process here in a second. And obviously, you guys are the stakeholders, business owners and larger property owners that we certainly want to get your feedback from. So again, I'm going to do a few slides. Then we're going to jump into feedback. I've got a few questions that spur some talk. I don't think we'll try to go deep into those, but if I need to, we will. Project team for this project. This is a quick hitting project. There's basically 4 meetings. 3 focus group meetings and a last design charrette. The actual team for it is Doug Harnish, economist. The first phase of this project was to perform a market analysis. Okay, because one of the township goals on this was to really start to get a handle on what the general market is. Where might there be gaps in the market from a land use and user standpoint and development standpoint. That's me, Jay. There's Dave, civil engineer. And then for the 4th meeting, when we actually try to come up with some sort of vision or this first look vision and start drawing on the site plan, Lynn Nishwitz, landscape architect, will be helping us with that. Project goals, really, again, it's kind of a quick hitting project. Like I said, we want to understand the Sycamore Township market. I believe all of you have a copy, at least of the executive summary of the market analysis, if not all the data that comes behind it. But the executive summary, if you read that, that's going to get you on that. We definitely wanted to educate and gain feedback again from folks like you in these 3 stakeholder groups. Before we did anything. And then that last meeting where I talked about really coming up with a vision or a master plan just to start to see what could work there, what might make sense there. That's where we wanted to kind of create a vision for the site to guide developers. And if some of you are kind of developer in the developer world here today, so you probably understand that. And again, it's always good for a community when they own property to provide some type of at least vision or roadmap, as opposed to just say here, who wants to develop something on here. So again, it's just going to be a first look at what might happen on there. Just to spend a minute on the market analysis. Again, there's a lot of takeaways in there, but I tried to pick out 4 that I thought were kind of higher level. Certainly there's, and some of this is kind of common sense. I mean, there's commercial and retail opportunities in the market. Commercial meaning that's kind of a kitchen sink for, office services, that type of thing. And so there's certainly, we have a lot of that here in the Kenwood and Sycamore Township area, and there's certainly more opportunities for that. number two there, the residential use, the economist, again, just from his experience and looking at the site and the market and the data in the market, it was his feeling that for a multifamily, this would be multifamily, obviously, for a multifamily project to be a piece of this, you might have to get into 80 to 120 units. Again, he did not perform, a extreme detailed pro forma that a residential developer would, but based on his experience and the site being just under 8 acres, somewhere in that, we wanted to see, what might be needed there if you wanted to go in that direction. 3, pandemic may delay office market in short term. Again, I'm sure all of you or most of you are probably painfully aware of that. There's a lot of this we just don't know. And there's a lot of this we don't know how this is going to turn out. The story's still being written. I think everybody would probably agree on that. So that's hanging out there. And then lastly, he said to obviously target businesses that aren't moving to e-commerce or, get ahead of the curve that you can see might not be heading to e-commerce. Target those businesses that are going to kind of always have a brick and mortar kind of, footprint, for the long term. So from a site overview, obviously we've got upwards of almost 700 feet of frontage on Montgomery Road. There's a couple parcels that the township purchased back there, residential parcels off of Orchard. And again, these next 2 slides, I'm going to turn over to Dave just to kind of give an overview, kind of the physical pieces of the property, utilities, etc.
So just at a high level, the site is very developable. It's kind of a redevelopment site, so you would kind of expect that. It generally falls from the west to the east, relatively flat grade, about 3% on average across the site. All of your utilities are in Montgomery Road. There's, I believe, a 12-inch water line, 12-inch sanitary line, and then you've got storm and then electric component in Montgomery Road as well. The only real significant challenge I think that you're going to have from an engineering standpoint here is going to be access. There's 5 access points along the south side of Montgomery Road. It'll be good engineering practice to try to line up with some of those. But with 700 feet of frontage, you're not going to want to have 5 access points. You're probably going to want to have more 2 or 3 access points just for good access management practices. So, that's kind of it, Jay.
All right. Certainly, if anybody has any site questions this evening, Dave's going to be your guy. That's a topography map. We have both of these maps up here on the board. If you want to come up here, we're going to take a short break at maybe 7:30 or so. If you want to come up, look at that closer, have at it. Again, what are the township goals for the site? Obviously, a lot of you probably know this, the township has a couple main ways they derive revenue, and the biggest one for a township in Ohio anyway is property taxes. On this particular site, there's a JED district, a Joint Economic Development District, which is one of the rare ways that a township can actually charge an income tax. Okay, so the township has to look at it from a sustainability standpoint, from a long term. How can this help the township? And quite frankly, and I told this to the first group, the citizens that live in the neighborhood back there. It's really trickles down real quick to everybody that has a stake in the township, relative to property ownership and services. So we can, just add another sustainable revenue stream. That certainly helps, both of those. It certainly helps, with maybe not having to, go for bond levies, or as many in the future. So in terms of the goals, certainly the sustainable revenue stream, is up there. We certainly want to buffer the adjacent neighborhood, over here, obviously coming off Orchard. And certainly that was, that came up in conversation with the first group. That's clear. Third goal, certainly relative to you guys, we want to complement and support the township stakeholders. That's why we're asking you here. I don't believe the trustees or the township in general wants to do anything that would certainly blatantly hurt, or not complement it. But again, we want to state that's important. And lastly, and you all are aware of this, particularly with properties you have, Sycamore Township is known for, having a high quality of development, aesthetic, materials, design. It's very high quality, buildings and sites and developments. And certainly, particularly, since, it's the township, obviously owning it right now, that's up there as a big time goal. Okay, but that really goes for any development project these days in the township. I've got a couple slides just showing types of land uses. This is really more for the first group. This is the same slideshow the first group saw. Those folks presume they don't have any development, type of background, or some of you do. I just want to give some ideas that if we start throwing out, types of land uses, what it is. Not that it has to be this, but I try to pick some local things. Office, it's typically going to be Class A office. That's right next door at Redstone. Again, I told everybody the first one, don't look at heights or, scale or size. Medical, that's a medical office building. Certainly that can vary in size as well. Those probably, as a market, probably has a lot of runway to it, just my opinion, going forward. Retail, that's a very large component of what's here today, and we all know what that is. Residential, again, this might be a mixed-use site, it might not. And even if it is mixed use, that doesn't mean that there would be a residential component to it, okay? But again, I just wanted to show folks that, hey, residential could be a piece of this. This is the AG 47 right down the street in Silverton, corner store in Montgomery. And again, mixed use. I'm sure most of you probably understand what mixed use is, probably pretty well. Again, this is more for the first group, but that's down outside of Atlanta. I just want to get a nice mixed use, then a nice bird's eye view, showing, a mixture of uses, very well coordinated, comprehensively, everything kind of integrated, connections, a lot of pedestrian and seating areas and all that type of thing, okay? Obviously, and again, most of you know this, mixed use has been around for a while. And, Cincinnati, even, there's been several mixed use projects. And certainly, again, my opinion is I think that has a lot of runway. That's kind of the future of not every site, but many sites. So again, that was my 15 or 20 minute kind of intro into the project, into the team, into kind of the goals, into the site. So with that, we'll just start into an hour and 20 minutes or so of discussion and feedback. Again, the township would like to hear ideas you have. Certainly if there's any concerns, we want to hear that as equally. And I guess I'd start out with a question for the group. And again, we'll just keep it casual. Everybody can jump in, but let me back up. I tried to put my stakeholder hat on, okay? And I'm a business owner too, like many of you, and not as big as yours, obviously, but I try to think, okay, if I'm a large stakeholder in the township, what do I care about when I come to this meeting, okay? I could come up with two primary things, particularly where in your whatever business or property you represent is, how can this potential development help my business or organization, and how might it hurt it or not complement it so much? Okay? Again, that's what I would want to know and I'd be interested in. So I guess I'll start with that as a question. I mean, do you have thoughts on how something or what could go here that might complement or help your business, your property, your employees? Even. Any thoughts? Feedback on that? I know it's hard because we don't know what's going there, but again, yes.
My first thought was something entertainment, something to drive people here to hang out, play, do something so that they can eat at our places, shop at our places, but just there's not a lot of entertainment around here except for the theater.
So keep going on entertainment,
So not necessarily like a main event, or, just somewhere where you can, not necessarily bowling alley, but, and not necessarily like a brewery, but some places where people can hang out, talk, maybe do things, play things. Yeah, just just event type thing where they can do things like that.
So it sounds like, on top of that, you said that you think there's a gap in the market, we'll call it Kenwood, the township market for that, there's a gap there.
Yeah, because I think they're going to go, the closest area you think of is Summit.
Okay, well, let me take that one step further. It's kind of a next question, or for a future question. So Summit is there examples of these types of developments or pieces of developments, particularly entertainment?
No, but I'm just saying, like you have Summit Park, so you park areas, but if you're going to go do something, you're thinking Westchester area or somewhere south. So if you had something where you can go and do things and be active, you're staying closer to your home area, or rather than having to go travel so far.
All right, thank you. Anybody else? Any other thoughts on what type of development, or what could go in here that might help you and your business, your employees?
Has anybody looked at this site? And forgive me, I don't know, exactly what kind of site you're going to need for a hotel use.
What, Dave, a few acres?
Yeah, probably 2 acres or so. 2 acres.
Or a half an acre.
Yeah, depending on the.
Parking's gonna drive that one, right?
Our hotel pad is half an acre. For 130 rooms, so.
So, wait. I was just gonna ask, so would you say that from your perspective, do you think there's a gap in the market and that this general area maybe needs some more hotel rooms?
I think we certainly should take a look at it. My thought process immediately goes to a mixed use because of the fact that it's a prime location, and there's so many different things you could do there. Hotel seems to be something that I don't see a lot of going up these days.
Yeah, that's the great thing.
There you go.
That's the great thing about this site. It's got such great frontage, such awesome, visibility, great access, interstate access. It's got it all. So it's a question of not what could go there. Everything I showed you up there and more could go there. It's like what's best to go there. That's the best use. Okay, thank you. Some entertainment, hotel, maybe some gaps there. Yes, sir.
So I think the township has a pretty big investment in this property. And I think you want my comment?
Yeah, sorry.
That's right.
So I think you have to look at, what kind of revenue you generate from that investment. Everybody told us our site needed to be a park, but, that didn't really justify the investment, nor would it in this case. So, obviously, again, I anticipate too, you're going to have a mix of uses. And you really have to temper those uses with one of the things that you mentioned, which is a transition or a buffer from the single family. So by definition, that becomes a less intense use on the north end of the site. But it seems to me, based on it being in a JED, that at least when things normalize, it would make sense from a payroll tax standpoint to look at some office on that site, because that's probably on a per square foot basis the biggest generator for the township in terms of revenue. And a combination of rooftops and office, and then some mix of commercial, obviously, is what we typically see in mixed use projects. My concern with retail is two things. Number one, I don't know what retail looks like in 3 to 5 years, which is the kind of time frame you're talking about on this. What?
I said, thanks a lot.
Well, no,
I mean, you probably don't either, do you?
I wish I did.
Yeah. So, I mean, that obviously is a question. Office is a question, obviously, right now, but we're going to have office again without question. And one of the things that always concerns me is preserving this asset, which is Kenwood Town Center. And so I think you have to be careful about what kind of retail you're throwing in that might compete directly with the town center. You know, I've said this from day one when we started our project 5 years ago, that anything we can do to maintain or enhance Kenwood Town Center is critical to at least the Kenwood area of Sycamore Township. And it also has an impact on the entire township based on sales tax and real estate tax and everything else that goes on there. So, you know, I think that the uses absolutely have to complement what's there. And at the same time, our experience, and the best example I can give you, is over the Rhine. The way you get commercial venues to succeed is by putting in rooftops. And, you know, that's the perfect example of that. No restaurants or commercial spaces could be successful down there until there were enough rooftops. And so I think, again, and I'm not saying that because we're a residential developer, I'm saying it because it makes sense to have more people living there so that you continue to create what we're trying to do across the street, you know, continue to create these live, work, play environments. And, you know, again, that's every time we can do that, we continue to enhance the long-term security of the town center. And I think at the same time, you can program destination type entertainment venues. You can program into that outdoor spaces, you know, park-like spaces within very dense developments. We see it all over the country. And, you know, again, obviously there are a lot of people that oppose the density, but based on the site and the value of that property and its location, you know, you've got to look at providing a dense environment that has its soft edges as well.
It sounds like kind of summary is you might see this site, even though it's on the smaller side in terms of mixed uses, but still viable as a live, work, play potential, right? What about from the Kenwood Town Center? What thoughts on, you know, what are your thoughts? I mean, it's hard to argue that the mall is not the primary, at least my opinion, is the primary anchor, you know, for this area. You know, there's a lot of sub anchors, but it's the big dog. What thoughts on what might help you? What might complement
More people. Yeah. Housing, of course. Just with Sycamore Township and our neighbors around, you know, we have Indian Hill, we have Madeira. We're already, locations are prime factor here at Kenwood Town Center. In Kenwood is just our area. But, thought mixed use. There's a lot of great developments happening around Cincinnati right now. I believe there's over $1.5 billion in active developments in a 10-mile radius. Right next door, we have one in Montgomery Quarter happening, and that's mixed use as well. It just works. And if it's done right, it brings in the demographic, I guess, we're looking for, which would help support us long term. So, you know, maybe something as far as luxury townhomes or condos, and then mix in entertainment style restaurants where you have the indoor, outdoor, rooftop, something where people will feel to come and enjoy rather than go to OTR. Keep them in Sycamore Township, keep them in this area. That's kind of thoughts we've been running with, but retail, we've got it handled.
I figured that wouldn't be top of your list. That's what it is. Yeah, understand. Yeah, and there is a lot of retail. Can't argue that one either. So, anybody else on thoughts on what might complement your business?
You know, Kenwood, and I think the Kenwood Town Center, correct me if I'm wrong, Kenwood gets pretty quiet at night. I mean, it's almost over by 7:30, 8 o'clock. So I would say more people living in the area would definitely help the retail and restaurants that are here. and of a quality, and I think, so I would be for apartments. I saw your density there of 80 to 120 for the whole site. Greg, you could put a few more on that, couldn't you? But anyway, so I think that would be good. I think Madeira missed the mark. They had condos going down there by Walgreens and they blocked it. And I think those restaurateurs are my friends down there. They would like to see a Gryway, Sipsey type development down there, and it would change the whole downtown Madeira for them. So I think this could help us all in retail and restaurants and that, especially at night when they come home versus going to other areas. And with the office we got that fills up during the day, and they go to the Kenwood Town Center on their breaks and what have you. So,
yeah, that's a great point. I mean, if you look at, opportunities or maybe capacity, I agree. It's like, unless I'm just arbitrarily picking 8 a.m. until 5, 6, or 7. And certainly there's a lot of restaurants in the township anyway, but I agree with you. To me, there's extra capacity not being tapped. And when is that? If you look at it like a clock, it's from like dinner time till whatever, midnight or whatever reasonable time. Then other areas, that's again, not we're trying to turn into an OTR, but it's like, there's capacity, at least for the township, number one, to bring in revenue. And number two, from a services, from attractions, there's opportunity where it does get kind of, less active, maybe a lot less active than the day, right?
and I think there's also room for the young professional as well as the person that wants to sell their home in Amberley, in Indian Hill, Montgomery, lock and go to Florida, wherever they go. And they have a couple different lifestyles in that, not just crank out the same, but have, little different income levels within that. Like they do in Florida, you could have X, Y, and Z type floor plans. And I think you get some pretty expensive when people are selling their homes in some of the areas we talked about.
That's another point. Good point. I just thought of this. It might be a fifth township goal or project goal is, and I make this statement to a lot of public clients talking about things like this or long-term planning, is that, again, I don't claim to know what the exact demographics are, from an age standpoint for the households in Sycamore Township in this general Kenwood area. I'm guessing, I'm more familiar with like Montgomery, but it's right next door. I mean, it's probably skews a little higher. People have been living here for a while, a lot of lifers, at least people I know. And, so, a community, it's certainly very smart to be able to say, hey, long term, we need to keep things fresh. We need to be attractive to get younger folks, 20, 30-year-olds, to move in with, and start a family and start to live here and plant roots. One way you do that, that's the good point I'm saying, it is, folks today of that age, they love the OTR thing or the nightlife and some of that stuff. Not that everybody is, but I think that's another big goal. Again, if I was a township person, be like, hey, listen, this is just one more tool that maybe we can start to, or even not starting, but you continue to attract younger families and homeowners, to keep everything fresh. A community always wants to keep doing that. You don't want to have to keep looking for folks and have folks die out. There's plenty of examples around Cincinnati where that's happened. So,
the residential, the total opposite of probably the township's goals with the JED, and because residential they don't. So you got kind of a
I guess the way I'm looking at it is, if what types of uses would be attractive to the families that may say, well, hey, listen, instead of moving to Westchester, just use your example, maybe there's a lot of stuff, maybe there's a burgeoning, walkable kind of community going on over the township, or hey, let's do that. And that's the 20, 30, 40-year-olds, that's everything that you guys know, that comes up. That's why you're seeing these mixed uses a lot. That's why you're seeing the OTRs be successful, where you can walk and go to, establishment after establishment, and shop and eat and drink and then go, so that's just another, I think, goal. That's a big point. So
The challenge with that concept for this site is just its size.
Right.
Even if you did nothing else but residential, you can't create the kind of, and when I say residential, like single family or townhouses or two-story condo buildings or something, three-story condo buildings that you see in Over the Rhine. And Greg mentioned grimy stuff like in Marymount, and that you can't get enough density based on the size of the site. So I think at the end of the day, I think the residential is really important for the site, but you have to create a more dense environment based on the value of the land and the fact that you don't have much land to work with there. And really, we're doing the same thing in our apartments across the street here. Is we're going after young professionals and empty nesters. We won't see, in 248 units, we won't see a dozen school-age kids in that development. And again, that's just because it's really geared towards a different clientele. Not wrong or right, but that's just the way it's set up. And when you go to a more dense environment, you're more likely to get young professionals, singles, couples, maybe some with, small children, but you generally have to provide bigger units, yards, or at least, more green space to attract the families. So I think it's a little different in this case. It'd be great if it was 27 acres.
Well, I want to make sure my last comment, give my opinion, is you're on the same page. I was saying that, maybe one of the goals is to, look at types of developments, types of users that the younger families want to be near. Not that you're going to fill that
right.
residential. It's like, hey, listen, they want to be able to walk 5, 10, 15 minutes from, I'm talking about existing homes in the township, okay, and be able to walk to, not a Topgolf, that's big, but you said Westchester, but things that are more active, and to your point, it's like, I think there's an opportunity there. It has to deal a lot with nightlife, and eating and entertainment, and that type of thing. So, agree. So,
I just have a question. Being you talked to residents last time, did that get brought up nightlife at all? I'm just curious to see how they reacted to a nightlife concept. If it did.
I don't think
That actually didn't come up. They talked about some community spaces, but not entertainment.
One individual brought up, hey, it'd be nice to have a park, amphitheater type of thing there. But you always get that, when you have, sessions like this on any kind of city or county or township owned site. No, it didn't come up, now that you asked me what did come up, the high points I can remember, certainly buffering, several of the folks, if not all of them, they all live back there, some of them right back there, the same backyards. And, they've seen the Redstone development, and that's right there, next to them, loud and clear. So we heard that buffering and how, and as most of you know, there's many techniques and tools to buffer, combination of vegetation, mound, spacing, and more. That's where at that first session, again, Greg, to your point, that's where, just planning 101 would say, well, maybe, doesn't have to be, but in a mixed use development, that might be a good place for some sort of strip or however you design it of residential. As you transition to more, more dense, more intense uses like a Redstone. Again, not that there has to be any residential on the site at all, but that would make sense. And if you're going to do residential, again, if I was planning this site and the township wanted to do residential or developer did, that's where I put it. A little bit along there, and then get more dense and intense as you get towards the street or most of the site there. So, and then I'm trying to think other, buffering, the typical stuff. If you live back there, they're concerned about the height. What's it going to look like? What's going there? First of all, we spent a lot of time talking about that, and I kept trying to say it's like. That's why we're here, and you folks are the first group. We're trying to get ideas and get feedback on what could go here. Almost anything could go here, most things. So it was overall, it was a good group, and it was all, fairly positive. Frankly, there was certainly some concerns, but you know, it had a positive vibe to it for the entire hour and a half. So, yeah. Yes, sir.
I presume the traffic issue came up with those folks, yeah?
A little bit, yep, sure. Yeah, how could that not?
Well, if it didn't, then you had people living outside of Sycamore Township there. And I think the reason I ask that is because, you know, you're going to have a reasonably high level of density of something on this site with a significant amount of traffic generation. And I think you just need to make sure that the approach is that, okay, we're going to manage the traffic. I'm not sure what that means and how it gets managed, but you have to accept the fact that there's going to be traffic generated by a development like this. At the same time, you try to make it as walkable as you can and connect to trios and, you know, all the other venues and amenities that are around there that complement whatever, you know, goes on the site. I mean, Greg will do more business on Friday and Saturday night with a development adjacent to him or, you know, just within walking distance. And I think, you know, you reduce some of the traffic by creating that walkability. You know, we've tried to create walkability not only within our development, but to the mall and to the hospital and, you know, into the shopping center adjacent to us, because that's what the people that were the residents in our building want to be able. They don't mind driving to work, but when they pull in at the end of the day, they prefer not to get back in the car.
You want to drive 3 minutes to go eat.
Right. Hey, if there are walkable alternatives, it just raises a level of demand for that asset tremendously. And so, you know, we're spending a lot of money to connect to the mall, to make sure we've got connection to Bill's project and, you know, even up the street to Trios and some of the other venues that are up there. And you know, this provides another kind of link that creates, you know, walkability around a bigger area. And I think part of the traffic planning has to be how to create the right sidewalks, how to create soft feel for pedestrians in going, say, from the mall to this site.
You create the perception that it's safe.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so that came up, and, you know, again, these folks weren't developers at all, and I was, you know, there's concern there on traffic, and I tried to tell them that just Development 101 says that, you know, two biggest, you know, factors in site density usually is parking, you know, and drainage. Yeah, sometimes you can go underground expensively to store your water, but you could, you know, build very expensive parking garage structures. But again, that at the end of the day, you know, that's going to limit how much of anything you put in there. And so that was what I kept going back to kind of take care of some of those fears of the unknown, which they naturally have. It's understandable. I will tell you that, you know, one question I asked them straight up was, I was just, you know, fishing for questions here, and I said, hey, listen, you know, would anybody see any value with having any kind of, you know, cross connection, you know, would you like to be able to get from Orchard, you know, out to Montgomery Road and elsewhere? And that was a very, I think it was unanimous, no, absolutely not. You know, just that's, you know, no connections, you know, so. But I know you're not talking about that, but I agree. It's got to be walkable. And I know the township and staff and trustees are obviously, you know, very aware, you know, traffic is a challenge and it's not fixed yet, you know, and that's kind of an ongoing thing. It's out there, it's on the radar. So, it's not easy, it's not cheap, as you know, that's the challenge.
You know, kind of building on what Greg said, when Greg gets built out, I don't know how much Montgomery and Kenwood, that intersection can handle. And when you get backed up, this was not a good year, obviously, for all of us with the COVID, but, you know, to get people on the northbound, to get them out of the Kenwood Town Center. And then Blue Ash did that connection down there at Mulsbury, down there where they did a roundabout down past Marx's Bagel. That in itself, people don't realize, put a lot of people now are getting off and coming Kenwood Road to hit 71 versus where they used to do Pfizer, Pfeiffer. So that gave us a lot more traffic. And I mean, to get out of there, to get out of Galbraith Road up to Montgomery, I think that needs to be considered, how much Kenwood and Montgomery can handle getting people in and out of there. When I worked for Mr. Lazarus, who was the Macy's, he said the most important thing in retail, now maybe he was wrong, but he said you want the shopper to have a good, when they exit where we're leaving. So the old malls that they were involved with always had 2 exits out, 1 in. So I don't know if he was right or wrong, but that's what he told me. So anyway.
All right, yes, sir.
I just want to jump in on what these two guys were talking about. Kenwood Town Center generates so much traffic. We get backed up on the weekends especially. And with COVID, you know, it's probably reduced traffic a little bit. So if we get back to some kind of normal, whatever we do with that site or whatever the township decides to do with that site, it's going to impact that traffic. And I don't know if there's any thought as to using that property to help that traffic issue a little bit, you know, widen the street, do something. Is there something that could be done there in conjunction? I know there's a BP station on the corner that, you know, I don't know if there's something that could be done with those guys, but I know that intersection is just horrible.
Well, I'm not an expert on it, but I do know just from talking to township folks that, and many of you probably know that, you know, a few years ago, that there was a in-depth study or conceptual kind of plans on how to handle traffic in this immediate area where you're talking about Orchard, your light, obviously, and the big intersection. Nothing ever happened with those plans. I mean, obviously, it had a very high price tag, but that's what I know is that they're aware of the issue, and it's an ongoing consideration on how do we fix this. And I can not to speak for Skylar and Ray, but I'm sure, as they do with every development project, I know for a fact that traffic's a big consideration. And I'm sure you turn down projects or limited density, or in other things, when the traffic impact analysis maybe comes back, it's like, whoa, I'm scared. We have enough challenges. We don't need that plus. So,
and it could be a deterrent too. I mean, it's people don't want to come to a spot they can't get in and out of, that sort of thing, and it'll impact that project as well. So
sure. I mean, I usually, that's a good point. Use the example, not to pick on any communities, but I mean, if you look at, Coleraine Avenue, if you look at Beachmont Avenue, if you look at Route 4, Fairfield, primarily in Hamilton, use the corridor. Like when I'm doing corridor projects, that comes up a lot. It's like, hey, at some point, when you get too many curb cuts or just, too much traffic, in general, congestion, accidents, all the above, guess what happens? I mean, it doesn't take too long until, storefronts start going dark. And frankly, that's one of the big triggers to those corridors changing over. And even though this might not be a true corridor, it's kind of the same thing. It's like, hey, at some point, if you don't deal with traffic, it's a path of least resistance. I mean, yeah, this is a mega destination location regionally, but at some point, if it gets too bad, I don't think we're there yet, but if it got too bad, folks are going to find somewhere else to go eat or shop, at least for a lot of things. So good point, good point. Yes, sir.
I don't know if this would be long term, and I don't know with the highway department, but years ago, my father-in-law, who owned the property at Kenwood Town Center and owns Indian Creek still, he was going to donate the land on the side of Indian Creek and the side of where the Best Western was my brother-in-law's hotel, the Hampton, or not Hampton, but whatever he called it. But anyway, if there'd be a way to put a ramp in there, off and on, I know it's federal, it'll probably take 5 years or I'll be dead before that happened, but that would help Greg's project. It would help them all, but you'd have an off and on ramp and be running up along Indian Creek. That would really help that whole project. And he was going to donate the land, but it was blocked by the Macy's people, and lo and behold, they lined up there. It's when they're across the street. Gotta watch what you wish for.
Yeah. Well, we got a $3 trillion transportation budget coming.
There you go.
For infrastructure.
Just make a phone call, Rick.
The people,
Busted now.
huh. But I don't know, that could be a possibility, it'd be long-term, but, I think there's enough slivers there of land that maybe it would work.
Yeah, Dave, is it still what, you need, ODOT requires a mile minimum spacing?
That's what they want.
That's what they want.
You have to do studies to justify anything.
Okay. That, yeah, I don't know if it's a mile or not. I just know that usually kills a lot of interchange ideas if you're at a mile or close to a mile separation, so. Segue from using traffic, my second question, again, my second big question, if I was sitting here, if I were you, would be what might hurt my business? What might negatively impact my employees or my efforts in general by whatever might go there? Type of use, amount of use, I've heard about traffic. I'm putting that in that category on that question. Let's jump to the concerns or issues, or what would you like to not see?
Retail.
I know you're retail, right?
We'll be fine either way. I guess we don't want to see cheap retail or strip center, like, you know what I'm saying? Just more so, there's a lot around Kenwood already, and a lot of them have vacancies, so there's a lot of opportunity. It wouldn't make much sense to add more, and then you're still going to have the traffic issues. So, add what we don't have, and bringing the life to the area, I think, is crucial. That late night vibe. Residential sounds really nice, but just looking at the area and all the houses that are in the back there, when they get listed, they're off the market within hours anymore. The real estate market's crazy here in Cincinnati, but with these priced homes, they move so quickly because they're first-time home buyers, so people starting their families. So that's a huge opportunity. Sorry. Thought I was speaking enough. But it just seems like there's a lot of opportunity to capture that audience, like we were talking about earlier. So I know it's not going back to your question. What don't we want? Anything will really help the area as long as it's of quality and it's going to help the community. Which entertainment's a big one.
Yeah, it's just not Jay's opinion. Looking at the amount of retail that is currently in this area, I'd be a little concerned about going heavy retail at all. Not that you can't have some in a mixed use or first floor type of thing, but going back to my corridor kind of stories, that's the same thing. I think when you get too much of a certain land use, particularly retail, what happens there? That over time, I think it could lead to some storefronts going dark. And what's the next step after that? Sometimes you may get some less desirable types of retail. Skylar, and who's planning guy for the and zoning guy for the township. There's only so much you can do from a zoning standpoint. Yes, you can regulate what uses go where, but retail is one of those things where one thing you might like, and the other thing you definitely don't want here, but it's basically the same thing. So from a zoning standpoint, you can't discriminate. So it's kind of a slippery slope with retail. So I personally agree with that. You got to be careful with that. That's why I keep saying, hey, what are the gaps in the market? What other goals can we achieve, like adding nightlife, like adding things that might draw other younger families to this general area, to the existing housing stock, to Greg's new housing stock, so any other concerns? Traffic, retail.
I think one of the concerns is going to be if you're going to have an entertainment or something like this walkability thing. It's going to blow this thing out a little bit more about what you're going to have to do from an infrastructure standpoint, because you don't see a lot of people walking. Especially when you get past the mall and things like that. I could walk here myself tonight. I live just right over here off of Kenwood Road here, but when I'm out I walk the dog and things like that, but you don't really see people out here during the weekends and things like that, other than the things up here at the corner when they're protesting and stuff like that. But other than that, there's people, it just you just don't have that flow of that feel of a community. It's because it's so commercial. And I understand that. I mean, you know, that's what we're all in, but you don't really have that flow. And if you're going to try to do something here with entertainment or, you know, residential, then you've got to help bring and tie all that stuff together a little bit more. So I think that's the traffic is one thing, because that's another thing that concerns me. But I think of trying to tie this whole thing together, I think is going to be important to make sure that you do have that feel of walkability and things like that. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons that you don't see some of that sometimes around here.
Good point. So that's the second, walkability and pedestrian. Is there maybe some sort of consensus that, well, I shouldn't leave that. Do you think, I guess I've heard from two people on walkability. The other folks, what do you think about the walkability in, we'll just say the Kenwood, area? Good, bad? Not the people who are there. I mean, I come here all the time. I don't see hardly any people walking even during the day. So I get that, but in terms of what's your view on walkability?
Well, we definitely have them walking in the mall in the mornings, that's for sure.
Well, yeah.
And to be honest, though, I've talked to a lot of our mall walkers, and the biggest thing is they want something safe, and they come to Kenwood. It's nice and clean, and it's a place they can go. Especially right now, there's not many places, and they live in the area, and they still come to the town center just to walk. So I think it's crucial, like you mentioned, just with the community aspect, like not so much a park, but if you're able to incorporate some sort of mixed use concept with entertainment, and maybe not a cut through on the Orchard, but a park right in that section where those houses are, and then maybe sloop down into the back of Trio's parking lot, and then we'll do a bridge over to Kenwood Town Center. But that's, that would get people out and about. It would bring people in from all those residential homes walking into the area. It's just how much capacity can whatever's on this property handle as far as traffic. If you do restaurants, how many parking spaces do we need? If you do residential, would you need a garage? Would you do a garage and then build on top of it? It's because it is a tight property. But I really like that community, like make it look serene, park-esque,
It's a look and a feel. It's an experience.
Yeah, and then you could really get people moving.
Create experiences. Trio creates an experience. You guys create an experience. I'm also writing down that you are Kenwood Town Center's, going to donate money for a pedestrian bridge, you said?
And we're taking donations too.
Check some of them out.
Well, you laugh at that concept, but frankly, we consider that as a way to connect our property to the town center. And you're right, the cost is exorbitant. But when you start thinking about walkability and pedestrian-friendly venues and creating more of a, whatever you want to call it, a downtown or a village concept, you have east and west and north and south. And, Montgomery Road divides those four quarters or four quadrants. There's no easy way to get from one quadrant to another. And so while that may seem far-fetched, long-term, I think it has to be part of the discussion about how you really do create walkability between the mall, between the northeast quarter and the southwest quarter, northwest, which is this site, and southeast and everything in between. Yeah, we're trying to do a project in Naples right now, and the intersection of two very heavily traveled, thoroughfares. And in order to solve some of the traffic issues, they're looking at taking one of them over the top of the other, just like they did at, what's the Golden Gate?
Yeah, Golden Gate.
Yeah, where it goes over Airport Pulling or over Goodwood or something. I mean, they're doing this all over the place in Naples, where they're taking one road over the top of the other. That traffic goes faster. They've actually slowed down the traffic on the other thoroughfare. Anderson Township, I used to live there and was on the Economic Development Committee. They took Beachmont Avenue and narrowed the lanes, created a buffer between the lanes and the sidewalks, made the sidewalks larger, and purposely slowed down traffic to create a more pedestrian environment. So there's a lot of things that go into that, but if you look at like Hyde Park Square, I don't know, that's maybe 3 or 4 acres. These four quadrants is probably 40 or 50 acres. And so how do you create walkability between all that? It's not easy, but I think long-term, it ought to be one of the goals of the township, because at that point, then the synergy and the complementary, uses between everything that's going on, just, it pushes everything up.
Yeah, I agree. From a planning standpoint, again, it's not much different than corridors, the long corridors. Coleraine, Route 4, Beachmont, same thing. There's such a large area up here. I mean, what I would start to look at personally is I'd start looking at what I'd call nodes, and you try to say, okay, where do we have good infrastructure, pedestrian infrastructure in place, and where can we, maybe some anchors existing, and where can we start building around that? And maybe this node, whatever this node is, becomes walkable, and then there's a node over here. And this takes time, obviously. Then over the course of years, maybe you can connect the nodes. But again, this isn't a Sycamore Township problem. I mean, and it's kind of good news, bad news. That's one of the bad things with having such a great, huge economic driver known as Kenwood.
Well, here's a quick question. So, just a perception standpoint, over the years, I know the township has invested in sidewalk projects. Is there a perceived improvement in walkability and multimodal, capabilities?
I think some of it's the fact that it's not connected. You don't feel like there's that way of getting from one place to another, and trying to get across Montgomery Road, trying to get across Kenwood Road. Try to walk across 71.
Oh, no doubt.
On that bridge. I mean, it's not that wide. Yeah, you walk across there, and like I said, I go out and walk the dog. I mean, sometimes you walk across there with an animal, or try to walk a dog on a thing that's, you got traffic flying around and things like that. People just aren't going to do it. They don't like that feel of, you got to have something wider. There's no bike lanes. There's no, that type of thing. I mean, could you put a bike lane in or something like that might help get people out doing things? And
I mean, a lot of times we're dealing with, it's either state right of way, county right of way, especially in this area, whether it's Kenwood, Montgomery Road. There's like Montgomery Road, there was room for sidewalk, but we've pretty much packed in what we can. Kugler Mill is a county road. That's sidewalk that's coming in. There's going to be connections down to Galbraith. Over
they
time.
They did a great job out here. I mean, when you look in front of, across from the mall and in front of the mall, I mean, there's nice sidewalks there. But you just don't, it just doesn't all tie together.
Okay.
Is what I guess I'm saying. And that's what, you get to a point, you go, okay, now which way I got to go? Or how do I have to figure out how to get across or get back or whatever? Or, that's the type of thing I'm talking about, is the connectability that the people feel like that they can get somewhere.
Okay.
Yeah, as Greg said, there's many tools in the toolbox. Most of them have to do with streetscaping and/or traffic improvements, right? Let me ask you this question. I don't have a specific area, but in general, one of the tools is, restricting traffic, and that could be sticking a raised median down. I think what township did that right down here.
That's a bad idea.
This is a loaded question. I'm saying there's things that I know some of you folks are having. Nice going. I hear you. But not that idea. No, but
if they, the Fairfax, what they have right there in the middle of Fairfax, when you go down through Fairfax, they've got that raised brick. I mean, it's just it's not up this high. It's you can drive over it. I mean, but it slows people down.
Right.
Yeah.
One of the key things about what Mark is saying in terms of you also got to feel safe when you're going down that sidewalk, even though it might be 6 or 8 feet wide. When I walk up and down Kenwood there in front of our project, I take a lot of care to make sure I don't get too close to Kenwood Road, because it makes you nervous because the cars are flying. So part of that is you have to slow down the traffic in order to create better walkability.
Road diets, as you said. Again, this comes up a lot. Like when I work, Dave and I, we've done work down in downtown Silverton, if you will, Deer Park, where again, much smaller scale, right? Okay, much easier on this issue, but it's the same tools. So what I bring up at those meetings or did was, that's why I said earlier, you have to create, not only, it's really more perception of safety than safety. And I don't mean that, don't take that literally, but it's like, there's only so much you can do to physically, I mean, a car can always jump a curb, okay, but you have to have people, and I always use the extreme demographics. You have to have that the family that's got the smaller kids feels safe, okay, or the toddler that's out of the stroller feels safe, okay, and then at the other end of the spectrum, your elderly, whatever age you want to say that is, they're not going to go walk anywhere around here. It's just going to be like, so even when talking about like Silverton or Deer Park, something small, doing things to create the perception that this is safe to cross. Again, right next to Deer Park, we had this discussion for a long time. They've had some fatalities. An elderly person got run over several years ago, and someone else got run over trying to cross, and there's that much traffic, nothing like here. But again, you start looking at, you have to be very deliberate about it. From a township standpoint, and say, okay, this is a big deal. We got to put some money into it and some thought. Things like creating planners. Not getting the weeds, so to speak, but creating planners, every so often, the concrete planners. That it creates a barrier. Now you have to put a wall. You can't put a wall, a planter wall on the entire corridor. But if you just do that, and even with the gaps, things like that. A lot of this, like retail, it is psychology, right? It's like you've got to create that environment. It's like, oh, that'd be safe to walk from here to here. And you just don't have that now. Which I agree, there's so much traffic, so.
Yeah, because how many people at the hospital here, maybe they can't go anywhere? I mean, really,
They won't cross the street to the mall, no. No one would walk over there. They walk over to where we have some parking.
Right.
That's it. Which is a shame, because you would think that is someplace they could walk over to during their workday.
Yeah.
So I don't see them doing that. Not easily. And we've had, at least since I've been here, at least 3 employees have been hit by cars. 1 on Galbraith and 2 on Kenwood.
Yeah, that one's a problem.
Do you hear a lot from employees? I mean, what feedback, or do you hear any feedback about all this issue of walkability or going out for lunch or dinner?
They would like to be able to walk to go out for food, definitely. That's something that we did here when Chick-fil-A was going to be over there. They were thrilled, that they could walk out and go to Chick-fil-A. We hear a lot, we have a lot of young employees. We have over 1,500 employees here who are interested in housing that's closer, and I think they would be interested in walkability. We have a lot of residents. We have over 100 medical residents who all like to live close by so that they can walk to everything with their families.
I actually brought some leases with me.
Yeah, for us, I think hotel is a big one. Hotel's a big one. We
Jay,
need hotel rooms.
Yeah, typically we would break so we could filter a couple questions to you. I don't think we need to take a break. If that means we can, just keep moving by. Can I throw 2 questions to you? Because a couple things that come up here that I haven't heard about before. And so mostly for Greg Fusaro, Beachmont Avenue is a state highway, a state road. We got them to cooperate to do that thing. And how long did that take? And then did you cost out a bridge over Kenwood Road, and what was the price?
The last question first, we did, I don't remember what the number was, but it was more than our project could sustain by itself. I think if there had been 3 or 4 other stakeholders in that, we might have been able to do it, but as one project, we just couldn't afford to do it. In Anderson Township, we've always had a really good relationship with ODOT, and I think there was. Oh, sorry, you're good.
I think it didn't take a long time, probably less than a year. We put this out to them, and we really looked at, as it turned out, the 5 lanes that Beachmont was, still is, but they were all, I don't remember, 12 or 13 foot wide lanes, and the state minimum was, let's say, 11 or 11 and a half. And so we really didn't have a lot of pushback from the state at all in doing that. And part of it was, if you slow down traffic, which is what our intention was, you're probably going to have less accidents to begin with. And so the consensus among the stakeholders in Anderson was that we wanted to try to create a center of Anderson Township that, included the mall and shopping center catty corner to that, and the McDonald's that's there, and a couple other things. We're going to try to make that area the center of the township. And the only way to do that with this enormous thoroughfare going through the middle was to try to slow that traffic down. We made the sidewalks wider. We put landscaping between the sidewalks and the curb, and it's created a much more walkable perception. And the traffic does move more slowly.
Right.
But the other thing they've done, and it's part of the puzzle, is, they've tried to create service roads or driveways wherever they could so that the number of curb cuts is reduced over a period of time. That makes it a lot more safer too.
That's my second loaded question for you. It's like, hey, you got raised medians down the middle, and you got consolidation of curb cuts. And then when new developments come in, you kind of say, well, instead of getting 3, you get 2. Instead of 2, you get 1. So yes, again, for groups like this, or for particularly other communities, the issue comes up with when you do these restrictions. A lot of times, either your employees or particularly your customers are going to let you know about it. Oh, I can't take a left there anymore, this and that. But again, you have to look at the big picture of saying, well, if you let this get out of control, you could have some of these, again, the Route 4 and Coleraine, where you can see over years, it's been kind of having some challenges. So,
Greg can attest to this better than I, but in South Florida, they have a lot of medians, but you can make a U-turn anywhere. And so the problem that we have here with that median is you can't make a turn anywhere to get back to where you really want to be. So, yeah, the one just south of Montgomery. In Florida, you can almost make a U-turn anywhere you want. And so you might have to go 100 yards. What?
They take a U-turn right there.
Well, they do it anyway, I know.
Yeah.
The difference in Florida, those roads were designed 50 years ago, and the roads have to be 300 feet wide.
Yeah.
The medians alone are not the width of Kenwood Road, but they're almost the width of Kenwood Road. So you have a big U-turn, and you can get into every business you want. We just don't have the access unless we tear down every building on Kenwood Road and start all over. That's the problem. And then too, the way I see it, with the capacity, the mall has to have the capacity to get people in and out, because you don't want to kill the mall. That's the goose that laid the golden egg. So you got to watch capacity. If you slow it down too much, they can't get people in and out when they're cranking.
have you ever worked on a project where you had to cost out or looked at a pedestrian bridge? Thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, we've certainly looked at them before. I wouldn't hazard a guess crossing Kenwood Road how much that would be.
I was just talking with Greg here, and I know you'll know where this is, probably if you're familiar with Naples, but that Venetian, what's it called, Greg? Venetian?
That's Venetian Village, and I was in that tunnel 3 days ago.
They have a tunnel under, they have 2 shopping centers on both sides of a pretty wide road, probably almost like Montgomery. The tunnel's under, and it's very walkable. You can walk from one side to the other, and
That's a great point. I've been there.
yeah, it's so then you're not worrying about overhead. You're not worrying about looking at something that's maybe obtrusive looking. This way it's underground. You don't see it, and it really makes a nice connection of what they did there. The guy was pretty. I don't know who the developer was, but is that who it was? Did a nice job with that, I thought.
Let me hit you with go ahead.
I was just going to say, just thinking of slowing traffic down, even if a bridge isn't feasible, and I know how Jewish Hospital, a lot of employees cross here. I see it every morning, but as well as in front of Trio, we have the stoplight there. If maybe in that corridor of Kenwood, sidewalks were widened and those crosswalks, they were lit up as well. When someone steps in the lane, they light up, just flashing. And then we just monitor it more. We have a great relationship with Hamilton County Sheriff's Office. We can get, we can politely ask that they post up a little bit more on that area and just kind of slow down the traffic, because that would help with the development, will help the hospital, help the mall, the Trio. And then with this, if we're able to cut across, that's one down, and then we'll you start to filter into the other parts, the other quadrants, but it might be a cheaper, more effective option right now.
I think you have to look at, areas so big, you have to pick your battles and see where you have anchors. And again, maybe this is one where you have a blank slate. Maybe this, let's say it wasn't mixed use with whatever, entertainment included, whatever. Maybe it could be an anchor to build a node off of. And maybe yours is another one over there, Greg. Again, I think when those get enough life, you can start making sense to connect those nodes with maybe a very expensive pedestrian bridge. Because let's be honest, you've got so many lanes that that's always going to be a challenge. So you got to kind of start somewhere. Question I was going to go with you, totally different topic, is you see an opportunity for this in terms of, if you talk about a community's front door, okay, this, you could say that this general area on Montgomery is one of the front doors. I'm sure, biggest front door is 71, sure. That's where most people come, but this is a big one too with a ton of traffic counts. Do you see any opportunity in the design, the township might be working through that or looking for developers, any opportunity to, from a design, aesthetic, to create oh wow, that's Sycamore Township or that's Kenwood or, thoughts on that? Do we have that already, in the township, or do we need that front door kind of wow factor?
I think to an extent you have it with Kenwood Town Center because it's so recognizable. And in fact, when we were looking at hotel use on our site is one piece of that development, there was a group that we were talking to and they said, well, are you aware of the fact that, I don't know what percentage or where they got the numbers, that X number of people that come to visit Cincinnati for a weekend on the list of things to do is go to Kenwood Town Center. I'm like, well, I didn't know that. So I think you have it, but my question related to that is the gateway is the corner, is BP. That's not really a very good gateway to Kenwood or Sycamore Township. So as part of any overall strategy and creating a gateway, that's where it needs to be.
That's kind of what I was saying. It's like this is, and I don't disagree with that is a major gateway, but this is so close. That's what I was saying. Incorporating this site so close to that, is that a gateway? Can that be the gateway? Agreed. Yeah. Any other thoughts? Well, we've got 10 or 15 minutes going to go. Is there any other good, bad, and different? Any thoughts? If you were a developer for a day, if this was your property, what would you do with it? Thoughts?
I guess my question would be is what's the township going to be willing to do here? Are they trying to maximize getting their number back or whatever they got in this thing? Are they willing to contribute things to it? How flexible are they going to be on zoning? You're going to have a major fight with you in the back there with the residents, I'm sure, especially if you go entertainment, which I think is a good idea, but who wants to listen to all that in their backyard and all that kind of stuff? So where's the township kind of feel as far as where they think that they...
I guess I'd answer it like, well, I'm not going to speak for the township.
I know you're not. I understand. I'm not going to get an answer out of it tonight either. I know that, but I'm just saying.
I can always answer anything, but some kind of answer. Here, I think the answer is that's why they started this process.
Right, I understand.
So I don't know, certainly you saw some of the high level goals, but there's a lot, like you pointed out, there's a lot of balls in the air on this. There's a lot of things to balance, a lot of needs.
I know, but if you go back to a residential type feel or that mixed use, more residential thing, that it doesn't accomplish the thing of getting the taxes for them. So they've invested a lot of money into this site and okay, well, maybe we made a mistake. We invested too much money. Maybe we should have done whatever. I don't know. I'm just throwing out things so, okay, we're going to take our lumps and let's do something and make it more residential or something like that, or more mixed use. That's more heavily residential.
That's a great question. And
I'm just throwing it out. You're asking for what other things. I'm just saying that those are things I think the township's got to think about as they move forward on this thing, as where is the flexibility going to be here? if they're gonna try to really do something with this thing. Because look how long Montgomery's fought with this thing in the corridor. They've been working on this thing for longer than you worked on yours, Greg. I mean, and I know that they had the highway and the roundabout, all that to deal with and things like that, but how many times they've changed that site over the last 4 or 5 years, and they keep moving things around, and the pandemic, I think, has hurt a few things with the way they're trying to do things, but it's,
Yeah, I think, I said, that last meeting as part of this project, kind of that design charrette, kind of that master plan and vision plan, coming up with something to start with, something more than that.
Right.
I think that's, and again, that's not, that group, that's gonna be involved in that one is what, you have a planning committee that's working on the land use plan update. That's who the township's using. We're taking all these comments and then starting to draw. And again, that's not going to be what it's going to be, but it's going to be something to start the dialogue, to hand off to the trustees and the staff and be like, okay, here's at least something to, shoot down or like half, so we're just embarking on it. So any other thoughts?
I have one more thought. The buildings that were on there were the apartments a friend of mine owned, and they were really struggling there, and then somebody else bought them from them. And so I think the township did a good job in cleaning up the whole site, and they got a lot of money in it. Obviously, you got the residential that doesn't help them with the JED money. You got the JED money coming from the office or retail. But I guess the question is, with Greg's development, with the office coming online, there's still more office to be built. I think that Davis just got. How much more money or JED does the township need if this went all residential? I don't know, it's not a for-profit township. I mean, it seems like the JED money that they're getting already is probably pretty significant. And how much more money do they need? What are the balances? And then they did a good job cleaning up a site, and putting in residential would help us at night. And they would forego the JED, but I think the JED revenues are pretty good, and they're coming more. You got 110,000 feet someday over at the FBI. We got 100,000, and they'll keep building at the mall a little bit. So I'm just wondering how much JED might you really need?
Again, I don't know. I'll just give you my answer just from working, in the public for many, many, many years, is that just like probably most of your businesses, when you're not in that business, you'd be surprised how much things cost. And again, it's just my perception, is that, Sycamore Township has a fairly high level of services. Okay. Not only for the businesses, but for the residents, and that everything is going up in cost. So yeah, I understand JED revenue is pretty strong right now today, but again, in 10 years or in 20 years, I don't know. It's not for me to answer that, but I just know that, again, being in a public world, that it's expensive to provide any level of services, not to mention high level of services. So if you want to keep that level and keep bond levies away, to me, I think it's important. That's just me, but the revenue sustainable. Finding those streams, because again, there's communities that are. I'm not saying this is Sycamore. I'm just saying there's communities all over that for a period of time they were doing great. And I'm not talking about like GM leaving or something like that, but just over time, with not getting more revenue streams in place, things can happen in 20 or 30 years. So, I don't know. I'm a revenue guy because I've lived on this side in the public world, and it's like, it's expensive, and you can give up services, or you can find new revenue streams. And there's a great opportunity here, but that's one of the things they're balancing. Good question.
No, I was going to kind of agree with Greg, but I think in that balance, they're going to have to decide if you do need the business community here to support this, and no matter what you do with this site. But I'm talking about even the township, because that's where the JED money's coming from. So without having something that's going to help draw people here, that's what I'm saying is, where are they going to be flexible enough? And I don't even know what that means. I'm just saying, but that's something that's going to have to be taken into consideration here.
Yes.
Especially if you're going to go with something that's on the residential side.
Yeah, I think to respond to some of that, the township is doing this process a little differently. this time around because we need input from residents. We need input from business owners. Kenwood is our primary economic engine in the township. I don't think we've had a property tax levy in probably close to 15 years. Okay. Our JED revenue factors very heavily into our annual budget. So, we're looking at the vitality and future prosperity of this Kenwood region, for our financial outlook. Yes, this site needs to contribute to the JEDs. We also need to make sure that we're not, adversely impacting an adjacent residential area. We need to make sure that the businesses that we have, we're supporting and cultivating. So, that's why your input is so important tonight. So, but to answer the question, at least in part, I think the township's open to, a lot of different ideas, but, this is a golden opportunity that we have. We have, over 7.5 acres of township owned land that, the stakeholders of the township are going to be able to help direct the development of. This isn't a single new stakeholder or developer coming in and trying to make a profit. This is a community driven initiative. So, you're playing a big part in that tonight. And, I think that's the track that we need to be on.
I think there's a balance, of uses that will generate JED revenue, but also, satisfy, I think, the other things that you want to see there, which again is some housing and entertainment venues. We're doing a 110,000 square foot office building that's 5 levels. We could have easily done 3 levels of office, 60,000 square feet maybe, and 2 levels of condominiums or apartments on that building too. But, we needed, in this case, we needed more office for TIF payments and that sort of thing. But I think, to Mark's point, the township has to really want to be involved and participate in this. Again, this is a site where I think you'd probably want to do underground parking, which is really expensive, but you could probably, TIF part of that and it would help, but you'll get a lot more uses if you can park it underground. And I think, the township also has to be supportive of the kind of density that I think you're going to need here. We had a gazillion residents opposed to our project, but, there hasn't been one person around us that owns a home that has sold their home. And in fact, the values are continuing to go up there. And so, those adjacent commercial developments to this single family neighborhood have not decreased the homes values. In fact, they've increased them because, as you said, these are first time home buyers. They have 1 or 2 little kids, and all of a sudden now you're providing them with walkability to restaurants, to entertainment venues, creating that kind of little village feel perhaps. And those property values aren't going down. Township, trustees have to recognize that, at the end of the day, this is a real benefit for the entire, Kenwood area and the township.
Can I ask you a quick question? And if you can't answer, I respect that. What's been your activity in any kind of pre-leasing in the office, or, pandemic's weird?
Well, yeah, the office market is upside down right now, and I'm not sure when that building's going to happen or if it's going to happen based on where we are today. I mean, it's just a very, very difficult climate for not only for office developer, but for office lenders. We do have a contract for the hotel, but subject to a lot of contingencies, not the least of which is financing. And there aren't a lot of banks that want to finance hotels right now. So COVID's created, a very difficult situation for both those uses. Hotels, I think, will shake out pretty quickly. I'm not sure when office does.
Great. Any other thoughts? Let me, I'll just show you the This is kind of the last slide. Next steps, I mentioned this, but you're the second line there, the stakeholders group here in March. We're going to do a developer focus group, about the same size, maybe a little bit smaller than this one, in April, in 2 weeks probably. And then sometime in May, we're going to do that kind of the master planning kind of session with this land use planning group that Skylar works with. And then that at some point in May, we'll tighten that master plan up and give a concept, kind of idea and hand it over to the trustees. So again, the goal is to start the dialogue and start discussion. To your point, I mean, I'm guessing that this will look a lot like Montgomery in terms of changing things. That's, sites like this, particularly mixed use that are larger and that nature, that's normal. So I wouldn't be surprised if many iterations. Sometimes you have developers that, you go through that process and you go through 2, 3, 4 developers, maybe they back out, maybe you're not happy with them, so it's normal, but we're starting, gotta start somewhere, and at least trustees are saying, let's go, let's do something, start the discussion, so thank you very much for your time, and it's very valuable, and it's very valuable to us, your feedback. Again, it doesn't stop tonight. This is gonna keep going, I suspect, for years, is my guess, probably. And, if you have thoughts, ideas tomorrow or next month or whenever, Skylar, you're probably the best guy to get a hold of at the township, email or call them. And, if something pops in your head, concern or something good, let Skylar know. We want to hear, trustees want to hear about it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Pat, and your hospital.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. We actually got some really new and unique comments tonight. So that definitely gave us a lot more to think about. Thank you.